The next heading is doctors can cure physical ills, but only God in His grace can cure spiritual ills. Point 364. What follows is a good definition of physical ills, spiritual ills, and spiritual disturbances. Point 365. Physical ills caused by physical things can be cured by physical things, such as medicine and other medical treatments, because the root of the problem is physical. Point 366. Physical ills can cause spiritual disturbances, mental disturbances, because the root of the problem is physical and not spiritual. Once the physical ill is cured or ceases, the spiritual disturbances ceases. For example, if a man does not get enough sleep due to pain or some other physical thing, he will become mentally disturbed to one degree or another. Once the physical thing that caused him to not sleep is removed or ceases, he will sleep and his mental disturbance will cease. If a man has a high fever caused by a physical ailment, he will be mentally disturbed to one degree or another, even to the point of hysteria. When the physical thing that caused his fever is cured or ceases, then his mental disturbance will cease. In these cases, medical doctors can treat the underlying physical thing that is causing the mental disturbance, and the mental disturbance will cease. However, mental illness, which is demonic obsession or possession, cannot be cured by any medicine or psychology, psychiatry, or any other human means, but only by God in His grace. Point 367. Spiritual ills, mental ills, are caused by evil spirits, demonic obsession or possession, and thus the root of the problem is spiritual. Spiritual ills can and often do cause physical ills, but the root of the problem is spiritual. Hence, the physical ills caused by the spiritual ills can only be cured or cease when the spiritual ill is cured or ceases. Only God in His grace can cure spiritual ills, and thus also the physical ills caused by spiritual illness. Point 368. While the attempted medical or psychological treatment of a spiritual ill may seem to cure the spiritual ill or the physical ill caused by the spiritual ill, it only covers them. And in many cases, more physical and spiritual ills arise elsewhere in the victim. Point 369. God has ordained that doctors, physicians, and medicine treat physical ills caused by physical things. And thus Catholics must submit to good doctors and good medicine when necessary and if possible to treat physical ills caused by the physical things. For example, Jesus, son of Sirach, says, "Honor the physician for the need thou hast of him, for the Most High hath created him. For all healing is from God, and he shall receive gifts of the King. The skill of the physician shall lift up his head, and in the sight of great men he shall be praised. The Most High hath created medicines out of the earth, and a wise man will not abhor them. Was not bitter water made sweet with wood? The virtue of these things is come to the knowledge of men, and the Most High hath given knowledge to men, that he may be honored in his wonders. By these he shall cure and shall allay their pains, and of these the apothecary shall make sweet confections, and shall make up ointments of health, and of his works there shall be no end." That's Ecclesiasticus 38, 1-7. Point 370. However, only God in His grace, and thus no man, can cure spiritual ills, because mental illness is caused by diabolic possession or obsession. For example, we read in Psalm 106, verses 8-9 and 19-20. "For He, God, hath satisfied the empty soul. He hath filled the hungry soul with good things. And they cried to the Lord in their affliction, and He delivered them out of their distresses. He sent the word, and He healed them." And 3 Kings 8:39 says, "For thou, God, only knowest the heart of all the children of men." In order to humble the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, God cursed him with madness by allowing him to be possessed by devils, after which God healed him by casting out the devils. Quote, "The same hour the word was fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven away from among men, and did eat grass like an ox, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair grew like the feathers of eagles, and his nails like birds' claws. Now at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes to heaven, and my sense was restored to me, and I blessed the Most High, and I praised and glorified him that liveth forever. For his power is an everlasting power, and his kingdom is in all generations. That's Daniel chapter 4, verses 30 to 31. Jesus healed many men who were mentally ill by driving out the devils that were causing their mental illness. For example, quote, "And when he was come forth to the land, there met him a certain man who had a devil now a very long time, and he wore no clothes, neither did he abide in a house, but in sepulchres. For he, Jesus, commanded the unclean spirit to go out from the man. For many times it seized him, and he was bound with chains and kept in fetters. And breaking the bonds, he was driven by the devils into the deserts. And they went out to see what was done, and they came to see Jesus, and found a man of whom the devils were departed, sitting at his feet, clothed and in his right mind." That's Luke chapter 8, verse 26, 29, and 35. Point 371. Hence, psychology, psychiatry, pills, hypnosis, self-help groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, or anything else that claims to cure spiritual ills, mental illness, is a false god or a fake religion, and hence is idolatry and of the devil. We quote from Wisdom's 17:8. "For they who promised to drive away fears and troubles from a sick soul were sick themselves of a fear worthy to be laughed at." Point 372. The physical effects of mental illness can be medically treated, but the mental illness itself cannot be successfully medically treated, as only God can cure spiritual ills. In most cases, the attempted medical or psychological treatment of mental illness make the victim even worse. Point 373. If medication that attempts to cure or abate mental illness is physically addictive, then the victim cannot stop right away from taking the medication and must wean off the medicine. Point 374. Financial compensation can be accepted for disability caused by mental illness, as long as the mentally ill are not required to accept medical help to so-called cure their mental illness. Point 375. It is a mortal sin of stealing to fake mental illness in order to get compensation. Many times God curses those who do so by allowing them to fall prey to the very mental illness that they pretended to have. Hence, they go from pretending to be mentally ill to being mentally ill, as God allows devils to possess or obsess them. Point 376. In the end times, many mental illnesses such as PTSD are invented and then become reality when men embrace them to be compensated by money or some other way, or for sympathy. For example, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is an invented mental illness. Soldiers who fought in recent wars and claim to have PTSD to get compensation eventually get PTSD and thus get possessed by devils. There is no such thing as PTSD until these end times. The soldiers who served under Joshua, King David, the Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne, Attila the Hun, and during World War II never had or even heard of PTSD. It is only embraced by cowardly, effeminate, and lazy men. That is not to say that there were never cowardly or effeminate men who broke during combat, but it was rare, and was not looked upon as a disease, but as a sin that can be overcome, as some who broke repented of it and returned to brave service. The psychiatric kooks also turn normal emotions, such as justified love, anger, hatred, and sadness, into mental illnesses, and the victims who fall prey to the lie become possessed by demons and thus really become mentally ill, and thus some or all of their emotions become irrational. And what is worse is that the victims are given pills and psychological or psychiatric treatment, which either makes the victim mentally ill if he was not, or makes him more mentally ill if he was. Point 377. Remorse for sins is not a mental illness, but a natural emotion that God uses to make men aware that they are guilty of sin, which may cause them to repent. For more information, see RJMI Topic Index, Mental Illness. The next heading is Blood transfusions, transplants, and research are not intrinsically sinful. Point 378. Blood transfusions are allowed for the sake of saving or enhancing lives. Point 379. Human body parts can be transplanted into other humans for the sake of saving or enhancing their lives, but never at the expense of the life of the donor. The only body part that is forbidden to transplant is a head, if it were possible, because a head is the most unique physical thing that distinguishes one person from another. Point 380. Research that requires the taking of a human life, which includes harvesting aborted fetuses for research or medicine or any other reason, is a mortal sin of murder. Point 381. It is immoral and mortally sinful to buy or sell human body parts for a profit by middlemen. However, individual donors can receive money for the body parts they provide, such as for giving blood or kidneys, and the hospital and doctor that perform the operation can receive a profit. Point 382. Animal body parts can be transplanted into other animals or humans for the sake of saving or enhancing lives. Point 383. Research can be done on living animals such as vivisections and dead animals such as dissections as long as its purpose is to save or enhance lives. However, any torture or otherwise undue pain inflicted on living animals is condemned, as well as any research for psychological purposes. Point 384. Research on living humans must not intentionally cause permanent damage or undue pain or be used for psychological purposes. Point 385. Dead humans can be used for research provided their body and body parts are treated respectfully and buried after use. The next heading, Against idolizers of nature and destroyers of nature. Point 386. The idolization of nature is a sin. Idolizers of nature are overly protective of nature and thus do not use nature to the good of man as God has ordained, and some sin against the first commandment by believing nature is God or divine. Point 387. It is against the natural law to destroy nature instead of being good stewards of the earth by deliberately causing or threatening permanent harm to the ecosystem for the sake of money or some other temporal benefit. If God let these people go without intervening, they would destroy the earth. Quote, unless the Lord has shortened the days, no flesh shall be saved, but for the sake of the elect, which he has chosen, he has shortened the days. Mark 13:20. Destroying a location by fire or food is not permanently harming the ecosystem. Only God has a right to permanently destroy the ecosystem either by doing so directly or authorizing others to do so. Some examples of not harming the ecosystem are as follows. Controlled burns to keep forests from becoming overgrown, which helps prevent massive wildfires. Use of oil for energy when pollution and smog are minimized to the most possible extent. Some examples of harming the ecosystem are as follows. Use of oil for energy without the greatest possible minimization of pollution and smog. Use of oil for energy when cleaner ways of obtaining energy are available, such as solar or wind or water power. Drilling for oil under bodies of water, since it is an imminent danger to the body of water because of potential leaks and the great difficulty in stopping them. Drilling for oil by fracking that harms the water supply. Dumping non-consumable or harmable wastes in bodies of water. Non-maintenance of green areas, so that all greenery is destroyed at the cost of making money, unregulated strip mining that harms the ecosystem, nuclear power as a source of energy because it and its nuclear waste are too dangerous if let loose in the environment, nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons because of their great potential of causing permanent harm to the ecosystem and a massive killing of unintended targets, humans, animals, and crops, etc. The practical reality of these weapons is that they will never be eliminated because this world is sinful and evil and because of the natural instinct of a nation to defend itself. So even if there were a good Catholic nation that had these weapons, it would have to keep them to defend itself. Only Jesus Christ, when he comes the second time, will purify the earth from these evils, which includes all weapons of war. The next heading is for Creationism and Geocentrism. Point 388. Geocentrism states that the earth is at the center of the universe and immovable. This was taught by the unanimous consensus of the Church Fathers. Hence, it is heresy to believe that the sun is at the center of the universe and that the earth moves around the sun, which is known as heliocentrism. I read footnote 25. See RJMI Topic Index, Geocentrism. Point 389. Creationism states that God created man of the slime of the earth and the first woman from the rib of Adam. This was taught by the unanimous consensus of the Church Fathers. Hence it is heresy, as well as unscientific and illogical, to believe that men evolved from an ape or some other non-human species, and that other species evolved from one species to another. Heresy is known as evolution. See RJMA Topic Index, Creationism. The next heading is on conspiracies. Point 390. Since the fall of Adam and Eve, all men conspired to bring about either good or evil. Hence conspiracies have existed since the fall of Adam and Eve. Men conspire against men, tribes against tribes, races against races, religions against religions, ideologies against ideologies, political parties against political parties, and nations against nations. Point 391. God is the author of conspiracies that conspire to bring about good. We read in 2 Paralipomenon, chapter 25, verses 26 to 27. For example, God was the author of a conspiracy against Amasias, king of Judah. Now the rest of the acts of Amasias, the first and the last, are written in the book of the king of Judah and Israel, the kings of Judah and Israel. And after he revolted from the Lord, they made a conspiracy against him in Jerusalem, and he fled into Lachish, and they sent and killed him there. Point 392, the devil is the author of conspiracies that conspire to bring about evil. We read in Isaiah 8:12. For example, speaking of evil Jews during the Old Covenant era, God speaking to the prophet Isaiah and Jeremiah says, "Say ye not a conspiracy, for all that this people speaketh is a conspiracy. Neither fear ye their fear, nor be afraid." That was Isaiah 8:12. And Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 9 to 10 says, "And the Lord said to me, a conspiracy is found among the men of Judah and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They are returned to their former iniquities of their fathers who refused to hear my words." And we read in the book of Acts, chapter 20, verse 19, and St. Paul speaks of the conspiracies of unbelieving Jews who conspire against Christians and Christianity. Quote, "Serving the Lord with all humility and with tears and temptations, which befell me by the conspiracies of the Jews." The next heading is against evil, secret, and non-secret societies. Point 393. Secret and non-secret societies that plot against the Catholic Church or plot against the theocratic, monarchical, or dictatorial forms of government in order to replace them with republics or democracies, or plot to bring about Marxist communism, or plot to bring about sinful capitalism, or plot to bring about immorality, or contain rituals or teachings that are contrary to the Catholic faith, or immoral and evil, are condemned. Freemasonry, which is ruled by apostate Jews, is one of the foremost evil secret societies. Point 394. Any so-called Catholic who joins, supports, or promotes an evil society becomes automatically excommunicated from the Catholic Church and thus is not Catholic. The next heading is against obvious falsehoods regarding natural things. Point 395. One of the conditions that pre-catechumens and catechumens must have before they enter the Catholic Church is that they must not be currently committing mortal sins. Point 396. Hence, pre-catechumens and catechumens who are obstinate liars must not be allowed to enter the Catholic Church until they repent of their mortal sin of lying. Point 397. Any members of the Catholic Church, the faithful, who are obstinate liars, are guilty of obstinate mortal sin and thus are under minor excommunication. Point 398. Men who believe in obvious falsehoods regarding natural things, after presented with overwhelming credible evidence that refutes the falsehoods, are culpable and thus are obstinate liars and guilty of obstinate mortal sin. Point 399. Natural things are subject to natural science, such as math and chemistry, and thus can be understood by human reason and human science. Supernatural things are subject to supernatural science and cannot always be understood by human reason, and in some cases contradict human reason and human science, such as the Holy Eucharist. Supernatural things that contradict human reason and human science must be believed by faith alone. Point 400. Members of the Catholic Church who culpably doubt or deny things regarding the Catholic faith dogmas are former heretics and thus are Catholic in name only. Point 401. Members of the Catholic Church who culpably doubt or deny things that are proved by natural reason and natural science but are not of the Catholic faith are not former heretics, but they are obstinate liars and thus obstinate mortal sinners. Point 402. Hence, even though some obvious falsehoods are not heretical, they are mortally sinful and thus are not allowable opinions. For example, any person who believes that tanks or guns or atomic bombs are illusions is either an obstinate liar or insane, even though the Catholic Church has never infallibly defined that tanks and guns and atomic bombs exist. Point 403. Therefore, pre-catechumens and catechumens who culpably believe in falsehoods regarding natural things must not be allowed to enter the Catholic Church until they repent, and the faithful who do so are under minor excommunication until they repent. Point 404. Jesus says that obstinate liars who believe lies regarding natural things are not worthy of being taught supernatural things regarding the Catholic faith until they first believe natural things that they can believe by human reason and human science. We read about this as recorded in John 3:12. If I have spoken to you earthly things, natural things, and you believe not, how will you believe if I speak to you of heavenly things, supernatural things? Point 405. And it would be a great scandal if Catholics and nominal Catholics who culpably believe in obvious falsehoods regarding natural things are allowed to remain in good standing in the Church. In the eyes of non-Catholics, it would discredit the Catholic God, Catholic Church, and Catholic faith in Catholics. And it would discredit the true things they do and say. For example, a Catholic or nominal Catholic who believes the earth is flat, a flat earther, but rightly believes in Geocentrism or Creationism, will discredit these two dogmas, as he would be rightly looked upon as a dishonest kook. What follows are some obvious falsehoods regarding natural things. Subheading: The Holocaust of Jews during World War II is an obvious falsehood. Point 406. The Holocaust of Jews during World War II is a big lie. Hitler did not want to exterminate all Jews. His final solution for Jews was emigration, not extermination. For more information, see the Holocaust Conspiracy page on the St. John the Baptist website. Next subheading: Hitler hated Jews because of their race is an obvious falsehood. Point 407. Hitler did not hate Jews because of their race, but he did abhor apostate Jews because of their evil ways, which greatly corrupt and disrupt nations. One proof is that Hitler allowed Christian Jews and nominal Christian Jews to be in the government and military and have positions of authority in the Third Reich. For more information, see RJMA book, Woe to You Who Call Evil Good, Talmudic Jews, Communists, Freemasons, and apostate anti-popes are more evil than the Nazis. See RJMI book, Apostate Adolf Hitler's Sins and Non-Sins. His final solution for apostate Jews was emigration, not extermination. And, quote, neither Hitler nor anyone else in Germany carried out a Holocaust to Jews, and Hitler, did not hate other races. And see RJMI video audio, Conspiracies of the Jews, parts 1 and 2. The next subheading is: Muslim terrorists in planes took down the World Trade Center buildings is an obvious falsehood. Point 408. In New York City on 9/11/2001, the two buildings of the World Trade Center and Building 7, which was next to the two buildings, were deliberately destroyed by demolition charges which were placed in the buildings before the plane struck the two of the buildings. And Building 7 was not even struck by a plane. Point 409. The United States government, apostate Jews, Freemasons, members of the Mossad, and other conspirators orchestrated and covered up the attack with the help of the major media. Point 410. These conspirators blamed the attack on Muslim terrorists as a pretext for war against the Middle East nations such as Afghanistan, Iraq, and Libya. For more information, see 9/11 conspiracy page on the St. John the Baptist website. The next subheading is, the earth is flat is an obvious falsehood. Point 411. To my knowledge, not one church father taught that the earth is flat, and the ones who taught about the shape of the earth taught that it is a globe. If so, then the opinion that the earth is flat is heretical. Point 412. However, for the sake of the argument, even if one church father taught that the earth is flat, and thus the flat earth opinion is not heretical, it is nevertheless an unallowable opinion, because it is an obvious falsehood which has been disproved by natural sciences, especially since Magellan circumnavigated the earth in the 16th century. For more information, see the Flat Earth Conspiracy page on the St. John the Baptist website. The next heading is, a list of some sinful things to condemn and avoid. Point 413. What follows is a list of some evil things that Catholics must condemn and avoid. Atheism, Protestantism, schism, and all false religions, churches, and sects. Eastern mysticism, which includes yoga, Freemasonry, Illuminati, Kabbalah, golems, the occult, black and white magic, such as Mary Poppins, which is white magic, black and white witchcraft, such as The Wizard of Oz and I Dream of Jeannie, witches, wizards, such as Harry Potter, warlocks, trolls, elves, Halloween, Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, hobbits, such as the Lord of the Rings, genies, imps, gnomes, fairies, the Tooth Fairy, leprechauns, vampires, such as Dracula, chupacabras, space aliens, such as Star Wars, Star Trek, and E.T., mythological gods and creatures, fantasy superheroes and humans, such as Superman, Spider-Man, and Batman, soap operas, buffoonery, such as The Three Stooges, The Marx Brothers, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello, Jerry Lewis, I Love Lucy, Jackie Gleason, The Simpsons, South Park, clowns, jesters, and fake professional wrestling, pornography, homosexuality, transgenderism, bestiality, feminism, effeminacy, such as Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, abortion, sorcerers, fortune tellers, palm readers, astrology, horoscopes, fortune cookies, tarot cards, Ouija boards, voodoo, santeria, brujeria, and Satanism. Point 414. Catholics are allowed to learn about these evil things for historical or educational purposes, or to refute them, as long as they do not glorify them. A Catholic can know that he does not glorify idols, false gods, or false religions if he reads a book or views a video that deals with them, and he hates, abhors, and mocks the idols, false gods, or false religions. Hence, his reason for reading the book or viewing the video are for historical or educational purposes, or to refute them. However, if he loves, likes, respects, honors, admires, or exalts the idols, false gods, or false religions, then he glorifies them, and thus is an idolater or a formal heretic. Therefore, to read about idols, false gods, or false religions to be enlightened, or edified, or enamored, or obsessed by them is to glorify them, and thus is idolatry or formal heresy. For more information, see RJMA article, The Catholic Way to Read About and View Idols, False Gods, and False Religions. This recording was produced by Mary's Little Remnant, 302 East Joffrey Street, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, 87901-2878, and can be accessed on my St. John the Baptist website at www.johnthebaptist.us.